since the representative of the beer board business is not here, we're going to just skip it completely.
Okay.
So he's going to start off our meeting. Okay. Ready.
Get the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for July 14th, 2016 called to order. I wanted to just let everybody know I'm David Smoke, the town administrator. Tonight is a little unusual. Both our mayor and vice mayor are both not here this evening. So because of that, the aldermen will need to vote amongst yourselves, discuss and vote amongst yourselves who we're going to be running the meeting as the officiant tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board and let you all make that decision.
Preference?
I think Bob's in the middle, so I think he should.
You okay with that? Or you want me to?
I'll go ahead.
Okay. All right.
Mike.
Oh,
There you go.
yeah.
I think you're kind
We're
of
all,
in the
we're
middle.
all kind of, is this good? Can you hear me now?
That's great, thank you. They're kind of in the middle.
We need to make a motion.
Make a motion.
Make a motion that Alderman Markley take over as chairman of the meeting tonight.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to our Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for July the 14th, 2016. We'll begin with rising to take a minute for a silent prayer, after which we'll have a Pledge of Allegiance and then a roll call. The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the first item of business is approval of the agenda.
Alderman Markley, I do have one item on the agenda, ordinance. It would be under ordinances 7B, first reading of ordinance 16-12. The applicant asked for that to be deferred tonight, so we just asked that that be deleted off your agenda. That's the only agenda item I have.
What is that?
It would be ordinance 7B1, first reading of ordinance 16-12.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
This is the last one on the first page.
Correct.
Ordinance, well, the last one on the first page is,
Number one.
It would be ordinance, it's section 7, ordinances,
This one.
B, first reading, and it's number 1.
Oh,
okay, it says ordinance 1612 on mine.
Yes.
It is ordinance 1612, it's just the agenda item is a 7B1.
okay.
7B. Okay.
I'm glad you clarified that. I'll move for approval of the agenda as adjusted.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, for mayor's report, the mayor's not here, and I don't have anything to report, so we'll move on. Do we have anyone signed up for the Citizens Forum?
We do. We have Mr. John Schoonmaker.
Commissioner Schoonmaker.
That was pretty good response there. I'm John Schoonmaker, 144 Tanrera Drive. I'm the Knox County Commissioner that represents the town of Farragut, Concord, and the rest of southwest Knox County. And I just wanted to take a minute to update you on the status of a road project that adjoins the town of Farragut. Unfortunately, one of the worst roads based on traffic accidents is Canton Hollow Road, which is basically the extension of Lovell Road just past where Costco is. As you cross Kingston Pike, that becomes Canton Hollow Road, goes all the way down to the water. It's about a 2.5 mile stretch. This year, because Knox County realized it is such a dangerous road, we were going to try to fix that road in 3 different installments. So we were going to do Canton Hollow and Woody Road intersection and spend just under about $1 million to redo that. Problem was, when we put it out for bid, we didn't get a reasonable bid that was returned. So now we've gone back, decided that we're going to try to do the whole road at one point. So we're going to end up spending between $6 and $8 million redoing that road. And we're going to actually start purchasing right-of-way in the fall of this year, and maybe hopefully start construction in the fall of 2017. But since residents that are coming from Farragut or to Farragut, some of them cut through that way to get to Concord Road, I just want to keep you guys appraised of what was going on. One of the things we are discussing too, and we'll put it up for a community forum, is instead of just doing, say, a sidewalk and a bike lane, maybe something to the effect of a 10-foot common area where you could handle bikes and public just walking, as opposed to a separate sidewalk and a separate bike lane. So, but none of that has been, resolved yet. So the main thing is to see if we can get the right of way and get going on that. But
narrowness of that road, that
and the curviness, and at one point, just past Woody Road, we're actually going to take 7 feet of the road surface down so that it improves the sight distance, but yet still keep the road open. So that's what makes it a challenge, as you guys are already aware of in your area. But I just wanted to kind of give you an update. I talked to you, some of you earlier in the year, saying, hey, we're going to start in April of this year on the 1, but since we couldn't find a contractor to do the work, we're just going to make it a little bit more appetizing, I guess, for somebody to do it all at one time. So.
Can I ask you a quick question? Have you guys adopted the complete roads, so that when you do a new road project, you are putting in sidewalks and bike trails on everything?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And then this is just a little bit deviation, because it would still be a bike trail and
Yeah,
sidewalk,
yeah.
but maybe, something a little bit different, since it's all residential through there too, so.
Excellent. Well, thanks for
Thank you.
Oh,
sharing
you
that.
bet.
I notice we have some scouts with us tonight. Are you guys here working on a merit badge? Great. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here. Anything else on the Citizens Forum?
No, sir.
I wanted to say one thing. I probably should have said the mayor's report. Walking the neighborhoods, I learned one thing. We have a very pervasive problem of speeding, and I assume that same issue in the South Ward. It's such an easily resolved problem, and people just laying off the gas pedal and in our neighborhoods, but it seems to be such a difficult situation. And I'm not sure if there's any easy solution, but education and trying to work with our citizens to have them kind of lay off the gas pedal a little bit in our neighborhood. So just wanted to bring that up for interest.
I do have a question about that. David, maybe as we do road improvements or road refinishings, could speed bumps be added?
Well, we have a whole process regarding how neighborhoods request speed humps. It's a pretty lengthy process. You can go through our town engineers department and ask about that. Right now, we've only had one set of speed humps in town that have been approved, because there's a lot of people in the neighborhood that have to want those things in. So I can't remember the street's name, but I drive it a lot over in Country Manor subdivision.
Clover Fork?
Yes, Clover Fork, that's correct. So those are the only ones in town right now.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, next on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the June 23 meeting. I believe both of you were present.
Yes, I've read them. I move for approval.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have a business item, approval of reappointment of the Farragut Museum Advisory Committee. And we have someone who was dropped from the committee because of illness.
Yes, sir. As after, in the charter, it states that the term of a member shall expire on the third absence from the committee during the fiscal year, and that member may seek reappointment from this body. And Jack Haynes is seeking reappointment, and the motion is to reappoint Jack Haynes to the Farragut Museum Advisory Committee.
We've not appointed anyone else to that position,
No.
so that will put the committee back up to its
Correct.
full complement.
I move to reappoint Jack Haynes to the Farragut Museum Advisory Committee.
Second.
I'll-
All in favor? All right. Moving on to ordinances, 7A, public notice of second reading. Mr. Shipley, did you have
First of all, y'all are going to be tired of me by the end of the night, so I'll just warn you ahead of time. So anyway, this item involves a piece of property that's just to the west of the Briarstone subdivision, east of Sellview subdivision on the north side of Turkey Creek Road across from Anchor Park. The request is to rezone this to the small lot, single family district R3, which is similar in lot size to what you see in Briarstone. This was recommended unanimously for approval by the Planning Commission in May, and it was approved on first reading by the board at y'all's last meeting. There was a condition that was placed on the rezoning from the Planning Commission, and it was carried through on first reading, and that was to limit the density to 35 house lots. And the idea behind that was to create a platting process on that property where the lot sizes were similar to what surrounds that piece of property, like in Sellview, kind of a mix between Sellview and Briarstone. So with that condition, staff recommends approval of this rezoning on second reading.
All right, is that specified in the ordinance?
It's just, that would just be a condition of the rezoning approval. The applicant is aware of that and has agreed to that, yes.
Is the applicant here tonight? Okay, and no changes since the first reading?
No.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. All right, next item, ordinance 16-13. Mr. Shipley, did you want to address that?
Okay. I will just give you a little bit of overview because the next three ordinances are really interrelated. This particular ordinance was presented to the Planning Commission at 2 workshop sessions before they took formal action on it in June. And basically the initial request was to revisit the town's front yard setback requirements in the C1 zoning district. And what they were requesting was to allow some flexibility to be able to move a building up closer to the public street. Currently, and I'll show you on these next 3 images, the setback provisions in the C1 zoning district are based on where the parking and driveway aisles are situated in relation to the building. Where you have parking in the front yard between the building and the public street, you have an 80-foot setback. Where you have just a driveway aisle shown on this image in the front yard, you have a 60-foot setback to the building. And this is the section here that the applicant requested to be revisited, where you have no parking or a driveway aisle in the front yard, you have a 40-foot building setback. And what they're wanting to do is to be able to lessen that to a 20-foot setback. When the staff reviewed this as a workshop item in April, we were very supportive of this request for a number of reasons. Currently, the setback for parking lots is 20 feet. So if somebody's wanting to move the building up closer to the street under our current provisions, it means you're going to have to set the parking lot 40 feet back instead of 20 feet because it has to be no closer to the public street than the building. So there's kind of a disincentive built into the current language for someone that might want to bring a building up closer to the street. This amendment would get rid of that disincentive and basically allow the building to be, parallel with the front plane of the parking lot. Another advantage would be to allow more flexibility in the placement of a parking lot in relation to the building. It gives a developer more options to have parking to the side and the rear of the building. It also helps showcase the appearance of a nice-looking building rather than when you're driving down a public street and looking at a large parking lot. We have design standards that we've adopted to help have attractive buildings in the town, and we feel like if somebody wants to showcase those and bring them up closer to the street, that's a good thing. And then it also, by bringing the building up closer to the street, it allows you to have more effective wall signage because somebody traveling on the public street can more easily see your signage instead of having a building, situated far away from the public street and separated by a large parking lot. It makes it hard to see the signage. So, and let's see, another advantage to doing this would be to allow for more stacking room between the parking lot access and the primary access off the public street. And then finally, having this kind of flexibility in our ordinance helps advance a number of provisions in our design standards. Like I said, the initial request was dealing with these front yard setback provisions, and these are some examples of buildings outside of the town where the building is actually moved up closer to the street, and what that would look like. You can have your signage out there closer to the street, more visible, more effective. But the staff, when we were reviewing this initial request, we felt that it might be good to also, while we're amending the C1 district, to look at some other zoning ordinance provisions that we've recently incorporated into some of our other ordinances, like the business district, 4-story, the S1, the mixed-use town center, things that deal with like setback clarifications for accessory structures, trying to provide for screening of parking lots from the public street, providing for streetscape and outdoor open space, connectivity and low-impact development measures in the parking lot. All those things, like I said, have been incorporated into our recent zoning districts, and they've been applied to new projects. We haven't had any issues with those. So we felt like those should also be included in this ordinance amendment, and they are incorporated into Ordinance 16-13. And when this was presented to the Planning Commission in June, they unanimously, with the exception of one abstention, recommended approval of Ordinance 16-13, with it being clarified that the term context appropriate would be, I guess, clarified for them. And the staff added some language in there to clarify what context appropriate means. And in this context, we added the wording that is appropriate in relation to the proposed development and its physical surroundings. And that language was forwarded to the planning commissioners, and they all felt like that addressed what the staff was referring to when we talk about context appropriate. So with that modification, the staff recommends approval of Ordinance 1613 on first reading.
Any discussion?
Mark, my question is with regard to the illustrations. The only illustration, it seems to me, that probably needs to be changed is illustration 8.
Yes, it would be the one on the screen, yeah.
And we
dealing
didn't
with the
change
40.
rear setbacks at all, so that would remain 90
Just
in
front
the rear.
yard.
Okay.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
So, Alderman Pavlin, you were on the Planning Commission. You voted in favor of this?
Yep. I like the one piece of language we put in there, context appropriate, gives us the flexibility we need if we don't think it's appropriate or the developer doesn't think it's appropriate. There's room for discussion on that.
Excellent. Any comment from the audience? Anyone interested in this?
No, it was the one that kind of brought this up and moving. Did you address that we changed the parking a little bit too? As far as, have we gotten to that one yet?
Parking lot islands.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Later. Yep.
Good evening, Alderman. I'm Noah Myers, 503 Concord Road. I'm happy to answer any questions. Mark's done a wonderful job of explaining this, and so I won't spend a lot of your time unless you have any questions for me. I'll be delighted to answer 'em.
I have no questions. As I said, I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm all for it.
Okay, thanks for being here. Is there anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
No, we're just excited that this type of flexibility is going to really, hopefully, philosophically change kind of the traditional strip mall look. And really the goal behind this was let's emphasize our architecture and de-emphasize the parking lots. And the way it's written today, you get negatively disincentivized by trying to do what I'm talking about, putting the parking lot in the back. And so what we were trying to do is even the playing field. And as we were working through this, there were some other items that we spent some time on, like the interior islands and some low impact development practices, some other things that we thought would really be good. So we think this is, you may not see changes significantly for a couple of years, but I think 20 years from now, I think you'll look back and go, wow, that made a big difference in the town of Farragut.
Excellent.
And without it, we're losing 20 feet of valuable space there, right? And developers.
It's not necessarily about that. It was just it was trying to think outside the box, and this is one of those things that's been popular in some other communities, and it was just as the town works through different ideas and concepts. Quite frankly, unless somebody brings it up to the surface and says, "Hey, let's discuss it," we just we leave well enough alone. And this is one of those things, kind of like the MUTC that we worked on a few years ago, that we have big dreams about, and we think that it'll happen. And now we have the language in the ordinance to be able to make it happen. So we're really excited about it. And
It's a more walkable feel. So there's areas where that makes sense, and of course there's areas where that doesn't make sense. So.
And I can talk about the context appropriate if it would help Ron and Bob. Of course, Louise was there, but we felt like that in certain scenarios, either in a development of maybe a single parcel in between two already developed parcels. One of the ones that we picked on was the O'Reilly Auto Parts. That's a plan that the Planning Commission approved a few months ago. And in that particular scenario, probably incorporating and adopting what we're talking about and putting the parking lot in the back probably was not going to be the best way. And a lot of it has to do with connectivity and has to do with line of sight and the way building placements are. So there's going to be some times that, the old-fashioned way of putting the parking lot in the front and the building in the back is going to be the better way of doing it. But we're hoping that when there's maybe larger pieces of property where there's a blank slate, and maybe even potential redevelopments where you're tearing something down and starting completely over from scratch, where it's appropriate with its neighbors on all three sides, whether it's commercial on two sides and maybe a residential on the back, then we can kind of think, well, yes, this works, or no, it doesn't work. And so we felt like that was real important. Even though it's maybe a little more subjective than we would normally like, we do feel like that's important to be able to send an applicant in the right direction when we see maybe something going in the wrong direction.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased to see that kind of out-of-the-box thinking. I think it will yield very positive benefits over time. Thank you for your time and effort.
Oh, absolutely.
Any further discussion?
I'm going to move to approve ordinance 16-13 on first reading.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next is ordinance 16-14. Mr. Shipley?
Okay. Basically, this ordinance applies the same modifications we talked about in C1 to the C2 zoning district. That's our regional commercial zoning district that's out near the interstate. Outlet Drive, most of Outlet Drive, which is undeveloped, is zone C2. So when we were considering the C1 amendments, the staff felt like we ought to provide that flexibility in the C2 zoning district as well, because without providing this opportunity that we have in this ordinance, you really could not build the development that's on the screen. That is a case study layout that our designers that prepared our architectural design standards did for the Outlet Drive property. It's just conceptual. That doesn't mean what's going to happen out there, but the point is, without modifying the C2 zoning district, you physically could not build that development under the current language that's provided in our zoning ordinance. So we wanted to, expand those modifications to include the C2 district, and that's basically the only difference between this ordinance and the previous one, and the staff recommends approval of ordinance 1614 on first reading.
Do we have any discussion on that? I have a question. Mark, could you explain to me again, because this is my first review of this,
Okay.
how this is different from 16-13 that we just approved?
Well, really the only difference is there's really no difference. There's some different setbacks requirements between C1 and C2 in general in the front yards, but in terms of where the building is placed closer to the street and the parking's either parallel with it or behind it, it's still the same 20-foot setback that we're recommending. That we talked about in the C1 zoning district. That would apply in C2 as well. As you can see on the screen there, a number of the buildings that they show on that conceptual layout are clearly moved up closer to Outlet Drive, and without providing for that kind of flexibility, someone couldn't actually build that project even if they wanted to.
I guess the question I have is, what is the difference in ordinance 1613? It says general commercial district C1, and in ordinance 1614 it says regional commercial. So what's the difference between general and regional as far as
regional
C1,
commercial,
C2?
as I mentioned earlier, is an interstate-oriented commercial district. It's really targeted toward the regional travelers, people that may or may not be that familiar with the town. You see a lot of gas, food, and lodging type of establishments in general and regional commercial. It's oriented out toward the interstate for regional travelers. It's a little bit more liberal in terms of the uses that are allowed in that district. So general commercial is more the commercial zoning district for pretty much the remainder of the town, like Kingston Pike. Most of the remainder of the town is general commercial.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I move to approve ordinance 16-14 on first reading.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mark, real quick question. I know that this came from our architectural design guidelines, but was this type of thing envisioned in our land use plan as well?
Yeah, similar, yes. Yes, it was. Yeah, really, from the staff's perspective, all these ordinances are advancing not only the design standards, but also our comprehensive plan. They move us closer toward, the vision of both of those documents.
Excellent. And I think we're all excited about the prospects of the development of Outlets Drive,
Yeah,
and I'm
that'd be
glad to
nice.
see some forward thinking going into that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, item 4, ordinance 16-15.
Okay, this basically would apply the same amendments that we talked about in the previous two ordinances to the Office 01 zoning district to give a property owner or developer with property that's zoned office that flexibility to be able to orient their building up closer to the street if they so desired. So it's, again, basically the same language, the same provisions, just applied to the office district. And the staff recommends approval of ordinance 1615 on first reading.
Office 1 has a maximum height, does it not?
Yeah, they all have maximum heights. Yeah.
But so off the other office districts, this might
Yeah,
not
no,
be as
01,
appropriate.
right, yes, that's a good point. 01 is just the basic office districts, 2.5 stories, 35 feet. We do have office districts like 013 and 015 that allow you to build a taller building like you see out at Parkside Drive with the medical office facility and the building where Duraline is located, the last building in the town. on Parkside Drive. So, but those are different zoning districts. This is just for the O1.
All right, any further discussion?
I'll move for approval of first reading of ordinance 1615.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, item B5. Mr. Shipley.
Okay, 1616 is dealing with another, I guess, site development aspect of our zoning ordinance that we wanted to look at while we were updating the C1, C2, and O1 districts. And one of the goals in the architectural design standards, and we've applied this to recent site plans that have come before the Planning Commission, is to try to minimize or lessen the visual impact of a large surface parking lot, to try to break up the parking into smaller sections or pods. So the staff wanted to pursue some language that would be in our ordinance that would help move us in the direction of achieving that standard. One of the things that the staff initially thought about was just to revisit how many parking spaces you can have in a row without an island, so that you have more landscaped islands in the parking lot. But after talking with the Planning Commission at the workshop session in May about that, they were concerned about losing parking spaces, but were very receptive to considering widening the width of interior parking lot islands. That's parking lot islands that are kind of in between rows of parking interior to a parking lot. The current minimum width for those is 5 feet from back of curb to back of curb, and what the staff and the Planning Commission felt would be a good measure to include would be to increase that to 7.5 feet. Not only would that provide for more landscape area in the parking lot, which would help again soften the appearance of surface parking, but it would provide a developer or property owner with an area where a shade tree would have a better chance of survival. I mean, our landscaping requirements are going to require somebody to put shade trees in the parking lot. You might as well provide enough space to where they're going to have a good protection of their investment. They don't have to go out and replace trees, or they have problems with the tree roots buckling the curb or the parking lot. So we felt like that would address this visual impact of surface parking, and also, provide for better shade tree health in our parking lot and a better appearance of the parking lot in the long run. So that's what's included in Ordinance 1616. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of Ordinance 1616, and the staff recommends approval on first reading.
Discussion?
I do have a question. In the information you've supplied us with, there's some added verbiage in
Yeah,
red.
That's right.
Talking about stormwater. Could you just take a second and explain that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that is, and it's all really illustrated on the lower image there. It's like with low impact development applications, what we're trying to do now in parking lots is, instead of creating raised curbs and channeling all the water that falls onto parking lots into catch basins and into a storm sewer system, why don't we direct that water into the landscaped areas? And if you have a curb barrier between the parking spaces and that landscaped area, the water can't get there. So what that language is talking about is just to give someone the flexibility to be able to provide for an inverted landscaped island rather than a raised landscaped island. It's kind of a different approach. You'll see it more and more, not just in Farragut, but a lot of the projects, the newer projects in the city of Knoxville, have incorporated that, because you're making a good use of your rainwater.
I'm glad to see that's in there. Good.
Yeah, so that's what that language is
Thank
talking
you.
about.
Any more discussion?
Move to approve ordinance 16-16 on first reading.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item B6, ordinance 16-17.
Okay, I'm going to try to explain this. It might be a little bit tricky, but basically, this ordinance is a request to amend our zoning ordinance for the mixed-use town center portion of our C1 zoning district to address the size of menu boards. Back in March of 2015, we approved some amendments to the mixed-use town center to allow for drive-throughs for certain uses, but we had some very specific design criteria that would have to be met. One of those criteria was that if you had a menu board, it would be limited to 15 square feet. Again, what we're trying to do is hide to the greatest extent possible the drive-through and anything associated with the drive-through in this portion of the town. As you may remember, originally there weren't any drive-throughs allowed in the mixed-use town center because we felt like, and the staff still would feel like, those are kind of a vehicular rather than a pedestrian element of site design. And we're trying to promote more of a pedestrian environment in our mixed-use town center. But anyway, since the ordinance was amended, the applicant at this time is asking that the size of the menu board be revisited to go up to as much as 36 square feet. This is a challenge in the mixed-use town center because you've got, the idea of trying to conceal it, and the bigger it is, the harder it is going to be to conceal it. And then we also are dealing with, which we'll be bringing to you in the subsequent months, the how to deal with content on signage. Fairly recently, the Supreme Court made a decision in the Reed versus Town of Gilbert case where sign ordinances are to be really content neutral and only regulate the physical aspects of signage. So a menu board by its nature is content based. So it's a real challenge with these type of developments that have unique signage needs like drive-throughs or gas stations and things like that. So with those limitations in mind, the staff presented a couple of options for consideration. This initially went to the VRB before it went to the Planning Commission. One option was to treat menu boards as basically site elements like a HVAC units or a dumpster, and just basically if you can hide it, that it's not considered a sign. If you can't see it from an adjacent property or right-of-way, then it wouldn't be governed by the sign ordinance. And the second option that we presented was probably more of a long-term option that will be incorporated into modifications we'll be probably making to the sign ordinance, and that is just to treat a menu board as part of a set number of primary signs that may be allowed on a piece of property, and you basically just provide a physical cap on the size, height, and spacing between the signs. That's probably the preferred long-term way to deal with these things, but when it was presented to the VRB and the Planning Commission, they felt like treating this as a site element was a better approach at this time. The Planning Commission actually recommended unanimously to approve Ordinance 1617 to allow for menu boards if you met the four criteria that I have there in your packet. The first is that the menu board and the associated apparatus has to be architecturally compatible with the principal building. It has to be screened with opaque material so that throughout the year they're not visible from an adjacent property or right-of-way. You have to have a screening plan that's presented as part of your site and landscape review to ensure that the the menu board and the area around it will not be visible, and that there would be a cap on the menu board itself of 36 square feet and 6 feet in height. So that's what the Planning Commission recommended in this regard, and that's what's reflected in Ordinance 16-17, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have. Basically, if you can't demonstrate that you can meet all these criteria, then you cannot have a menu board. So the idea was, if you're concerned about drive-throughs and menu boards, if you can't see it or you don't know it's there, then it's not an issue. That was kind of the thought process.
I like that.
I have a question.
Yes.
This relates both to ordinance 1617 and 1618. So before we vote on 1617, I'd like to clarify these two. The language in 1617 states that the current wording says that you cannot exceed 15 square feet. And we're going to change that to 36 square feet. But in the next ordinance, 1618, the wording says you cannot exceed 25 square feet, and we're changing that one to 30 feet. Why aren't these numbers consistent? What am I missing?
Well, the first one, the one we're talking about right now, is actually a zoning ordinance amendment, not a sign ordinance amendment. This is specific design criteria that relate to drive-throughs in the mixed-use town center only.
Okay.
The next ordinances I'll talk about a little bit is dealing with menu boards outside of the mixed-use town center, and it's a sign ordinance amendment. And it will be in a setting to where hiding the drive-through and the menu boards is not important, because it's in a more vehicular-oriented type of development or setting.
I guess from what I heard earlier, and I don't know exactly when I heard this, but previous meeting, someone mentioned that some of the businesses need 36 square feet, and I'm just wondering why the 25 square feet going to 30. Why we're not going from, in the next ordinance, why we're not going to 36 feet as well? I guess you're going to address that later.
Talk about that with
That's
that one?
fine.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve ordinance 16-17 on first reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Motion passes. Item B7, ordinance 1618. Mr. Shipley?
Okay, just going straight to Ron's point here. This is a sign ordinance amendment. It came about as a part of the larger discussion concerning menu boards initially in the mixed-use town center. And we had someone request that size be enlarged to 30 square feet. That was their request, was the 30 square feet. Plus, when we looked at some other communities like Brentwood and I think a couple near this area, Alcoa, I believe, theirs were 30 square feet. So we felt like that was consistent with other similar communities and their ordinances. The thing with this particular ordinance and amendment is it could change anyway in the near future when we update the entire sign ordinance, because we're going to have to address this idea of content neutrality. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, but if somebody gets approval for a 30 square foot sign in the interim, they will be okay. I mean, it'll be grandfathered in, but basically that's why it's 30 square feet, is because that's what they requested, and that's what we found to be most common in other communities that we looked at.
For some reason, I was thinking we had requests for 36 feet outside the mixed-use town center already. We have not?
No.
Okay, must have been mistaken.
Yeah.
No, sir. I think we had initially had some conversations in our economic development committee with one of the members there, and that works at a local fast food restaurant, and their request was needing to get from 25 square feet to 30 square feet. And I think when we started doing investigations and polling other cities and seeing what they did, it was pretty consistent that we saw 30 square feet. And I think that would meet what they're asking for their national chain to be able to change out their menu boards fairly frequently and not have to have a special sign made.
Okay.
So that, that answers your concerns?
Satisfies me.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I move to approve ordinance 16-18 on first reading.
And I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, item B8, ordinance 16-19.
Okay, this is also an amendment request to the zoning ordinance and mixed-use town center section of the C1 district. And basically, and this has gone through the VRB and, of course, the Planning Commission. The way the mixed-use town center is currently worded, the only reference to signage is that box or cabinet-style signs are not allowed in the mixed-use town center. The rest of the sign provisions fall back on the sign ordinance. So what the applicants requested before you here is for this district to allow for a different signage package based on the unique development of properties in the mixed-use town center. You know, you can build. The idea here is to bring the building up closer to the street, you know, and so that you have the parking kind of to the side and the rear of the building. And what they're wanting the ability to do is to have a sign facing the public street, so that if you're driving down Campbell Station or Kingston Pike, you can see that who's in this building. And then once you get into the property, to have an opportunity for a second wall sign to basically identify from the parking lot where their space is. Currently, you can only have one or the other, but you can't have both. So really, what they're requesting would incentivize a plan of development that I think we want to see in the mixed-use town center. By, you know, giving someone an opportunity for a second wall sign where that may not be allowed in other parts of the town. When this was reviewed by the Planning Commission, they recommended unanimously to approve Ordinance 1619. And basically what the provisions in that ordinance contain would be language that allows for a wall sign on the public street, 1-to-1 ratio, which is the same wall sign ratio that we have. Well, these images are outside of the town center, and then to have that opportunity for the secondary wall sign, provided that there's conditions A through D were met for that property, and that is that the property must directly front along an arterial street. There can be no surface parking in the front yard. The secondary wall sign would have a slightly lower sign area ratio of 0.75 to 1. That's generally the size of most of the signs in Renaissance, just to give you an idea of what that would look like. And then that the secondary sign shall be placed on the wall where the primary entrance is located. Then there was a couple of other provisions that deal with signage in general in the mixed-use town center, and that deals with lighting, and that the signage be consistent with the architectural design standards. What was approved in Ordinance 1619 is that the lighting, to give it a classier kind of downtown look, would either need to be externally illuminated like something you see on the screen, not that, or backlit, kind of like that. It gives it kind of a glow, a classier look, so that was included in Ordinance 16-19, and the staff recommends approval of this ordinance on first reading.
Any discussion? Questions? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 16-19 on first reading.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Well, that concludes the business section of our meeting tonight. Next is the town administrator's report. Do you have anything for us?
Real brief, Alderman Markley and members of the board. Monday, we're actually going to be highlighted on WBIR's Hometown Spotlight. The town of Farragut will. They've been doing some different coverage of us all week long, getting ready for that. And it's going to be on live at 5 at 4, and they'll be out at Founders Park at Campbell Station Park. So we're looking forward to having them out here and highlighting the town of Farragut, which is going to be great. Also, we have right now Intro to Farragut applications. Will be closing here very shortly, so if anyone's interested from the public to be part of our next Intro to Farragut class, I'd encourage you to get those applications in. They'll be they're online at our website, townoffarragut.org, or you can come by anytime and pick one up as well. And then finally, y'all probably were in the same storm we were in today, but we did have some damage out there tonight, and our guys have been out cleaning up some of the rights of way and getting some of the trees cut down that were in the roadway. And we had a little bit of damage to our Avery Russell house across the street as well. So we're going to have to go get that inspected tomorrow. But anyway, everything's in as good a shape as we could hope for at this point. But appreciate the guys going out and working a few extra hours today getting that cleaned up. So with that, that's all I have to report.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about the damage to the Campbell Station Inn?
If you go out there, you're going to see a roof in the shingles of the roof in the tree next door. So it took off the back part of the roof and put the shingles into the tree. So, and then part of the wall is a little bit damaged on one side. So we'll need to go out there and do a good inspection of it.
Wow.
Can I make a real quick comment? Lawn Cherry Series continues tomorrow night in Founders Park, and early voting starts tomorrow.
And what time is the lawn chair series?
It starts at
6.
6
p.m.
If you haven't been
That's right.
there, it's a lot of fun.
And
You
food
need to go.
trucks and, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Should be a great event.
Excellent. And I don't see Mr. Hale here tonight, so it doesn't appear we have a town attorney's report. And if there's no other business, we will call this meeting adjourned. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Good job.
Great job. Under an hour. Yeah.